Hello, this is the Week 4 coding assignment by Patrick Corcoran. Question 1 asked us to create an array of numbers called ages, shown here. Part A asks us to subtract the first value from the last value programmatically. Using the dot length method to find the last index, we get 93 minus 3 equals 90. Part B asks us to add a new value to the array and repeat part A. Using the dot push method, I added the value 55 to the array, so 55 minus 3 equals 52. Part C asked us to loop through the array and average all of the values. I use the for loop to iterate through, adding all the values to a variable and dividing that sum by the length of the array to return an average of 31.66. Question 2 asks us to create an array of names, as shown here. Part A asks us to loop through the array and calculate the average number of letters per name. I used a for loop and then added the length of each element to the variable and divided that by the length of the array to get an average of 3.83 letters per name. Part B asked us to loop through the array and create a string of all the values separated by a space. I used the for loop to iterate through and added all the values plus a space to an empty string variable. Which gives us our string here. Question 3, how to access the last value of an array. I access the last value of an array by using the dot length method and subtracting 1 to get the index of the last value due to arrays being 0 indexed. Question 4, we access the first element of an array by using the array's 0 index position. Question 5 asked us to create an array to store the length of names in the previously created names array. Using a for loop, I pushed the length of each element into a new array as shown. That gives us this array here. Question 6 asked us to sum up the lengths of all the names in the names array. I used the for loop to iterate through and added all the lengths into a variable, and we get 23. Question 7 asked us to write a function that takes in two parameters, word and n, then to print out the word n amount of times. I used the for loop to iterate through 3 times and added the word hello to a blank string variable, giving us the output of hello, 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 shown here. Question 8 asks us to create a function given the parameters of first name and last name and printing out the full name. I created a simple arrow function that takes both names and outputs them with a temperate literal separated by a space. I used my own name, Patrick Corcoran. Question 9 asked us to write a function that takes an array of numbers and returns true if the sum is larger than 100. I used the for loop to iterate and add the values to a variable, then used an if statement to check if it was over 100 or not. Using the ages array returns true, while using the name lengths array returns false, as we can see here. And if I change this over to it now returns false. Question 10 asked us to write a function that takes an array and returns an average of all the elements. Just like in question 1c, I used the for loop to iterate through, adding all the values to a variable and dividing that sum by the length of the array to return an average of 31.66. Question 11 asked us to write a function that takes in two arrays and compares the averages and returns true if the average of the first array is higher. So I used the array average function that I had created for question 10 and put the average of each into a temporary variable and compared them with an if statement. Name lengths and ages returns false since ages is much larger. Swapping them will return true. You can see it's false there now. And once we save this and update, it now returns true. Question 12 asks us to create a function will buy drink that will return true if it is both hot outside and we have more than $10.50 in our pocket. I used an if statement to determine if both parameters pass the check, and it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So if we go and change is hot outside to false, we can see 12 here will change from true to false. Question 13, I created my own function to determine if my kids can play video games. It is a very common question that I get after school every day, but they do know that there are certain responsibilities that need to be met before they're allowed to. I ask for user inputs if they have performed said tasks and stored those answers in an array. I wanted to use an array function that I had not used before, so I chose to go with the .every method. It evaluates every element in the array and returns true only if all the elements conform to the check I created. If all of the user prompts were answered yes, you can play video games. And we'll run through that here now. Did you wash your hands? Yes. Did you take everything out of your backpack? Yes. Did you finish your homework? Yes. Did you have a healthy snack? Yes. And we can say, yes, you can play video games. If I was to run it again and answer no to any of those questions, you can see that it'll say, no, you cannot play video games. Take care of your responsibilities first. Thank you very much.